Simplify your life today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we are going to simplify our lives. Doesn't that sound simple? But it is simple, and to join us is Miriam Ortiz y Pino. Did I say that right?
It's Ortiz y Pino.
Okay, Ortiz. All right, good. And you're out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a certified professional organizer, a friend of ours from NAPO, and simplify your life. Now, that's a big promise. How are we going to deliver on that?
Well, it's pretty easy when you know what you have and where you keep it.
Okay.
Which, of course, is the problem when you have too much clutter, right?
Right. So I'm having a sense here that simplifying your life probably has multiple dimensions and variables to it. So let's kind of pick it apart a little bit. If you're working for me, let's talk about a client who might come into you and say, I need to simplify my life. Kind of deconstruct that. What does that usually mean?
Usually people are feeling overwhelmed because of all of the information that's coming at them and all of the stuff they have to take care of and deal with, whether it's their own or within their family or their coworkers. There's just a lot of stuff to deal with these days.
And we're not just talking physical stuff. We're talking about mental stuff, and we're talking probably time stuff as well.
And digital stuff. Yep, it's all part of the picture that leads to overwhelm.
All right, well, let's sit down at our first meeting together, and how are you going to assess my situation, and what are some of the conversations that you have with a new client when you're helping them simplify?
Right. I take the approach of reverse engineering their situation. So I like to start with what they would like their life to be, not what it is now, because now isn't working. It's overwhelming. It's complicated, and they're looking for help. So I start with, what do you want it to be like? And then we mash it together.
Do you like ask questions, or how do you pull that out of them? I mean, do you kind of try to paint pictures or, come up with a scenario?
I have a couple different tools. I usually have people stop and do some creative visualization and think through some key areas of their life. I don't usually use the full 7 that a lot of people discuss, but some sort of body, mind, spirit, or self, family, community, some sort of 3 to 4 areas of your life that you want to focus on. And that gives us a starting point.
Do you feel like after you've even just gone through that, you see some relief in the client because you've got them thinking away from the present and maybe a little bit bigger?
Exactly. Sometimes they have a hard time seeing what's possible for themselves, and I'm actually really good at that and seeing where we can leverage our time and effort to make what they envision happen quickly and easily.
Okay, so we have this vision, maybe a little bit bigger picture. How do we take that and put it into steps? Do you take one at a time? How do you kind of approach it from there?
Right. Then we start with a place that's we can start either one of 2 places. Either the place that is bothering them the most, causing the most stress for them, or we start with the place that will provide the most sanctuary the quickest.
Okay.
So sometimes having a place to go to be calm and peaceful allows people to deal with the rest of the project. Sometimes there isn't really a place to start that, so we start with the place that's bothering them the most.
Do you find like there's maybe a top 3 things that really cause people to be not simplified or overwhelmed? What are the 3 biggies?
Yeah, I would say the way they deal with their paper, okay, the way they deal with their time, and probably to a certain extent the way they deal with their own personal grooming and hygiene and taking care of themselves.
Okay.
Just ends up being a little off kilter.
Well, let's talk about paper because, we hear all this stuff about how paper is, going away. Everything's digital now, but it still seems like in my mailbox and house, I don't know how that recycle bin is full every time I put it out. Why is there so much paper, and what are some of the ways that we can deal with paper?
Well, first you have to realize that paper is actually a storage spot for information. It's not a piece of paper that's important. It's the information on the paper. So thinking of it that way instead allows people to start consolidating their information. And the redundancy in the information we tend to keep is kind of ridiculous when you start delving into it a little bit deeper. So you might have, your mother's phone number in your phone and in your address book from high school and in your address book by the phone and in your other phone and in your computer and written on 27 scraps of paper around the house. When really you just need the phone number in one place and know where that place is so you can find the phone number when you need it.
And hopefully you have your mother's phone number memorized. But, I don't. So when you're working with someone, what do you, where would you store phone numbers? I mean, do you think the phone is the best place with maybe like a backup on a computer, or?
It actually doesn't matter. What matters is you know where that place is.
Okay.
So I do a lot of customizing of the system based on the way my clients think. I still have a lot of clients that use an old favorite address book, which is fine. Let's just make sure it's as up to date as possible and the numbers you need are in there. Kids, though, it's right into the phone. No thought whatsoever about any other options. So what I do, though, is connect the fact that you have that information in this place so you don't need it over here, and we can now toss or recycle that piece of paper.
Do you think people are like paranoid about losing, especially in the digital thing, like, okay, we got to back this up, we got to back it up, but it's probably the same with keeping all those extra papers. Is it just a mental syndrome or something that people, are afraid that they're going to lose it, even so they got to back it up 2 or 3 different ways?
Yeah, it's a weird disconnect, though, because it is exactly the same thing on the computer as it is with the paper piles around your house. And they're worried about losing it, so they keep a variety of copies, but then they don't actually back up their hard drive, or they don't actually send it to the cloud. So it's a weird disconnect in how that actually works, and how you need to think about it to make it work better for you. It doesn't matter how many backups you have if you don't know how to access them, or you're backing up the wrong things.
Well, you must have some tips about paper management, maybe specific tools that you use, or containers, or different things for different, like in the kitchen, how do you deal with paper? In your office, what are some of the different tactical things that you would recommend to clients using to help them control the paper?
Well, it totally depends on the individual. So I am not married to any one particular file system or pile system or drawer system. I am more of the teach them how to think about their paper, and that way a system will evolve that works for them. So it's more about designating the place and then figuring out what that container will be. But so many people never even defined that, okay, this is where I'm going to keep names and addresses, or this is where I'm going to keep warranty information, or this is where I'm going to keep my recipes. It's kind of all over the place and just kept. So once you start defining the area, that can make a huge difference.
Now, do you have a system or a technique for dealing with paper, like on the very front end? Like, how do you deal with mail? Do you have a system for doing that? Like, do you get it out sorted, or do you put it in a box and sort it later? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I actually have a whole system for dealing with mail. I call it the 1-minute mail solution kit. But basically, it's defining the 4 spaces you can put, or that come in the mail. You have stuff to read, you have stuff you need to enter that's semi-temporary, and you have stuff you need to just have for reference, and you have stuff you need to act on. So those are the only 4 kinds of paper you get. So when you bring in the mail, whether it's in your inbox on the computer or from the mailbox, the physical mailbox at your house or business, you need to sort the mail into those 4 categories. Of course, there's the 5th one, the trash or recycle immediately pile, which should be the biggest. But the other 4 are the ones that stress people out. They think they need 27 categories when really it's just 4. There's only 4 things you can do with paper.
Well, that's kind of the essence of simplifying right there, taking it from 27 down to 4.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, we're going to take a quick little break here, and when we come back, I want to talk about some of the other aspects of simplifying, like your time and some of your other clutter. We kind of covered paper a little bit. So we are with Miriam Ortiz E. Pino from Albuquerque and morethanorganized.net, and we'll be right back.
Now you see it? Now you don't. Now you see it again. Smead erasable fast tab hanging folders have a special erasable surface that makes it easy to reuse and revise the labels on your hanging file folders, saving you time and money. All you need is a permanent marker, standard white eraser, and Smead erasable fast tab hanging folders. Use erasable fast tab hanging folders with a built-in reinforced tab that you can use again and again. No more messing with tabs that fall off. Erasable fast tab hanging folders are stronger than standard hanging folders and come in a variety of colors for even more organizing possibilities. Erasable fast tab hanging folders, an eco-friendly reusable innovation from Smead, keeping you organized.
We are back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about simplifying your life. And I'm still working on the name. I think I'm doing pretty good. Miriam Ortiz E. Pino, correct? Yay! Okay, from morethanorganized.net out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a certified professional organizer. And so before the break, we were talking a little bit about simplifying your paper and like especially dealing with mail. Are there other tips for dealing with paper, maybe other than mail, that people accumulate? How about like magazines and catalogs? You have rules like you can only keep a magazine for 3 months, then it goes, or how about those people that like to save, hundreds of years worth of magazines?
Well, I am not hard and fast on any of my rules, but what you need to understand is that magazines and catalogs should be a built-in rotating system for it, whatever your comfort level with it is. The information is timely only for a certain amount of time, and then it's irrelevant. So learning to recognize relevant information to you is kind of one step, and the other is just build in a rotation system. So if it's 6 months, if it's a year, if it's 1 month, if it's 1 week, just the new issue comes in, the old one goes out, whichever the oldest one is, and you keep that number of issues on hand. And it doesn't really matter so much how many you choose, but making a choice and sticking with that.
Right. So some of it is just like they've got to decide. You're not telling them what to do. They've got to decide, okay, I want this many, and that's it.
Right. I do try to give some guidelines as we sort through backlogs and things in terms of, is financial information and investing news really relevant before the latest recession? Because everything changed after that.
Right.
You probably don't need that. But anything from then, maybe, I don't know. Depends on your situation.
Right. Okay, well, let's shift to time management now, because when I think about simplifying my life, I think about saying no to a bunch of commitments that I have. How do you coach people through that whole process of looking at all the things they're involved in and then trying to, decide if I'm going to live a simpler life, I probably have to get rid of some of these things?
Right. And again, I take it back to that initial exercise I have them do about their bigger picture vision and their goals. If one of their goals is to spend more time with their family, and they've enrolled their kids in 800 different activities, and then they complain because all they're doing is driving around and not spending time with the kids, maybe you take away some of the kids' activities so that you have actual time to spend together, and you make that one of the activities your kids are involved in. Maybe, I'm big on leveraging. So anytime you can knock off 2 birds with 1 stone, maybe one of your other goals is to be healthier. And so now you spend the time with your kids making healthy meals together and sitting down to dinner together. Okay. That knocks off both at the same time.
All right, let's take and put a story behind this without giving out the names of a client or whatever, but tell us about maybe a client who had a very overwhelmed life and how you helped them simplify.
Okay, well, first we look at their bigger picture goals, and that way all of our activities in terms of decluttering and fixing their schedule work in conjunction with that desire to simplify. And now we know what areas need simplifying first. But basically we just start at one point and work kind of methodically through each room of their house and their brain and their work life and their schedule. And we see where things can be eliminated. It's a lot about eliminating the redundant and the excess when I simplify people's lives.
Well, what about, so you get to the end of your process, let's say, they feel, well, there's got to be some follow-up. What kind of follow-up do you recommend so that someone is staying on task and staying simplified, not falling back into old habits?
Right. Well, again, I build in habit formation through the process of working with me. So I'm always taking it back to, let's look at those goals and values you had in the beginning and see that we're matching it up every week. And every time we work together, I go back and evaluate the stuff we've already worked on to make sure it's being maintained. I also build in weekly phone calls with my clients that usually last 3 to 6 months, so that there's check-ins and points of contact where they can ask a question or get clarification if something isn't going well. And I can redirect them and get them back on track fairly easily.
How about planners? Now, I'm sure you have some that use digital and some that use paper, but are there some principles of a calendar or a planner that system that you like to see that it's got to have at least this, and this in it, and how you might go about structuring that?
Yeah, it needs to at least have the days of the week or the month or the year mapped out.
Okay.
It does. Planners get people really hung up. They're always like, well, I must be using the wrong planner. And it's like, no, it's the way you're thinking about the planner. So the planner is the container that holds your appointments, the things you committed to at a certain day, time, and place. So that can be expanded from, your doctor's appointment and when you have to be at work and when you have to take the kids to school, when you have to go on date night, to when you go to the gym and when you work on your spiritual stuff and when you go to the grocery store and run your errands. And, all those things can be added into the planner if you think of it as the container for when you do those things.
Now, some people say that you should put in either white space or free time. Are you a proponent of that? Should you schedule like a block of time when you're not scheduled to do anything?
Yes and no. I actually take a Sabbath myself, so I take one whole day a week where I don't schedule anything. I do what I feel like doing. Although I live most days on feeling, so that changes a little bit. But that's the one day I don't schedule. But I don't necessarily think you have to add in white space. I think you need to define what you're using your time for and if that time is being used towards your goals.
Okay, great. So we've covered time, we've covered paper. How about just general clutter or stuff? What are some ways that you help people? Because I'm imagining to simplify your life, you need less stuff. Is that a good assumption?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you deal with that?
Again, we tie it to, is this stuff helping you reach those goals and helping you live the values that you said were important to you in the first place? Often people own just a bunch of stuff or extra stuff that came with the stuff they needed from the kit. Like they'll buy a set of cookware because they need the one saucepan and they keep the 6 bonus skillets just because they came with the thing. And you don't really need them because you have the favorite one that your grandmother gave you, and that's the one you use 90% of the time. So it's a matter of matching up what you own with what you're trying to accomplish, and at the same time seeing or realizing that once you own something, it's your responsibility to take care of it. And if you're not willing to take care of it, you probably don't need it. Right. If you're not willing to take the time to take care of the stuff you own, you probably don't need it. It's not actually important to you. You keep telling yourself it's important, but you're not taking care of it. So I try to match that up for people, and it can be quite freeing.
Is there any way that you can have like a maintenance kind of decluttering, instead of just going in and, like once a month give something away? Or do you have any little tricks like that you tell people to do? Or, maybe in your calls to them, are you reminding them, is there anything you can take away this week? Or how do you deal with that?
I don't necessarily put pressure to get rid of stuff, but once we set something up, I build in the system so that it's self-correcting. So when we do someone's desk, we check all the pens, and then I get them in the habit of any time a pen or pencil doesn't work, they actually throw it away instead of putting it back in the pen cup, and they replace it with one they really like. In the clothes closet, I always have a spot where they can put clothes to donate. So if they try something on and it doesn't work for them anymore in that moment, instead of putting it back in the closet and going, I'll go through my whole closet later, it goes immediately into the donation bin. And I set up something for general household goods that's the same thing. As soon as you realize that shampoo doesn't work for you, it can go in the trash. As soon as the blender stops working or you get a new blender, you put the old one in the donation box. So I build it into the system. So you rarely have to do a whole house overhaul again.
Right. Those are great tips. Well, listen, we're out of time, but I want to give you the opportunity to tell people what kind of services you offer. Are you just Albuquerque? Are you virtual throughout the United States? And how can people reach you?
Yeah, I work both in person and virtually, and I work all over the world, actually. People can find me and get a bunch of free resources and see the various ways I work, which includes workshops and one-on-one stuff and a home study course. It's all on my website.
Okay. And that is morethanorganized.net.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, good. All right. Well, listen, I feel freer already, a little more maybe simplified. Of course, now I got to go back and do the rest of my job, which, that's another challenge for another episode. But hopefully we can get you back on again and talk some more simplifying.
Anytime. I'm happy to join.
Miriam Ortiz E. Pino, morethanorganized.net, today on Keeping You Organized.